Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today I'm going to be taking a look at MYFAROG RPG, the 3rd edition. I'm going to break up this video most likely into at least 2 or 3 parts. So today I'm going to focus on the game itself, its setting, and how it's different from the previous edition of the game, which was 2.7. I was really quite surprised when I found out that this game was being released, or this edition was being released. Really wasn't on my radar at all, and so it was only about 5 days ago that I discovered that it was going to hit Amazon, or it already had hit Amazon. And so I ordered it, got it within 2 days, and spent the last 2 days actually, leafing through the book and reading a good portion of the rules. And there's not many rule changes, but there are some. But there's more changes in the setting, and that's what I wanted to focus on for today's video. So without further ado, let me jump in and we will start taking a look. Now on this here screen, you'll see the book is right here. I'm going to be flipping through this. In the top left-hand corner, I have MYFAROG 2.7, which was the latest edition of that particular setting. Now, that setting of Thule, which is the map that you see on the top right, that particular setting was basically Iron Age, or just going beyond the limits of the Iron Age of European, a European setting. Now, it's still set in a fantasy setting, though, so it's mostly European folklore and traditional concepts of magic that you find in the game and such. So there is no real world correlation between the lands of Thule, even though they're essentially a map of the islands off the coast of Norway. There's no real world connection between the game and its setting and its systems and the real world. So when playing this system, what really attracted me to the system was the fact that you had to be fairly careful. It's an unforgiving system. So in that sense, it's very old school. It is a bit numbers crunchy, but not to the full extent that it's ancestry. Let's put it that way. The game systems that it was built off of, which was like Rollmaster. So it's really closer to a Rollmaster clone than it is a D&D clone. So we have that. So that was the one setting. The second setting, which came as a pamphlet, small booklet, was The Coming, which is a post-apocalyptic setting where you would set it in the real world, but obviously none of what you see in today's world you really see that much of there, as far as society or culture or nation states and such. Everything is really very much after, a full apocalyptic event. And then we come to MYFAROG 3.0, which is a continuation of the mythic fantasy setting, but now it's going into a new phase, so it is going to go forward. So let me jump into that. So this is, and actually let me go here. So this is the book, 1 volume. So it has everything that you need in one booklet, and it's about 222 pages of content. It's fairly art light, so there's not a lot of content. It's mostly information and charts and such. There are some small art plates that are in here, but the there's an image of a small weapon. So, but throughout it's an art light booklet. On top of that, so on Amazon, I picked this up on Amazon. It's less than $12. So you're getting a complete game system in less than $12. So it's really hard to hard to pass up that if you just like to read about systems that you're unfamiliar with and get an idea of what some other games are doing out there. You can't go wrong for $12 for not just a core book, but several supplements all wrapped up into one. So that being said, let's go back to taking a look at it. So we're going to go off, and I tabbed off some things here. So the metamorphosis section of the book really goes through and starts explaining what was going on that brought us from the 2.7 setting to the 3.0 setting. And, for the most part, what happened was that the gods of the land of Thule had gotten so discontent with with the nature of man and how man through, his evolving civilization had, had essentially offended the gods, and they were becoming much too arrogant and, pushing away, shifting from a more religious, traditional life stance to just a more traditional life stance, kind of moving from the tribalism and the small community setting to a more medieval setting, where you'll have the introduction of some cults, and all of the cults were monotheistic cults, and obviously the traditional old or ancient Thule was really based more on a polytheistic belief system. So the gods came down and retaliated by basically destroying those town centers with a curse, and changing all of those settlements into into places occupied by wraiths and other type of creatures and everything that would just not be compatible with humans re-entering those old ruins, unless they're going in there for extremely dangerous adventures and such. So basically driving the human population out into the wilderness areas to basically pick up from scratch. Now, what the metamorphosis also did was it also changed some of the other non-human beings that were in the world, such as so the elves, it made them much more reclusive, and they shrunk back from any real contact with humans at that point. The dwarves, it took them from being a solely underworld race that you would encounter only outside of direct sunlight, and it moved them to becoming a race capable of coming onto the top side, I call it, or the the land above the underworld, and they but in exchange for that they lost their immortality for that. So, and this was largely based on what I believe that the dwarves were, the dwarves had done certain things within their own society that kind of circumvented the structures that the gods had placed for them. They had gone around what their purpose of existence was, and so this was a punishment, was that they would lose their immortality, but they also gained the ability to go above into the sunlight world. And so if you're running a campaign around the time that this transition is taking place, there might be adventures that you're player character groups go, as either dwarves going out into the sunlight for the first time, or vice versa. Humans that are discovering dwarves in the on the top side part of the world for the first time. They go through an introduction to the game itself, an introduction to Thule, so it starts talking about the origin of men, and it goes to character creation and development. So something new in this is that there's a karma system, and one thing that that MYFAROG had always had an element of was that element that your player character is is a unique individual, and his or her actions throughout their life are something that is going to be passed on to through future generations of themselves, through reincarnation. And so each character is always trying to discover or tap in their true selves, their selves from past lives. What this version does is, so when you generate your character, there are many factors that you take into account, and Haminja, I guess that's how you pronounce it, I'm not really sure. It's kind of like a karma system. So when you're creating a character the first time, you get 3 karma points, and those 3 points can be spent on these options, or you can gain 1 point extra character roll skill of the player's choice. You can gain an extra train skill for a 1 point expenditure. For 3 points, you can start with 8d6 ounces of silver in addition to your normal starting value. So you could start off. So these are various types of talents or skills, or just some way to differentiate your character. And so they can expend those 3 points, and then that's it. Like, new characters will have these traits automatically, all right, plus anything else additional that this first character kind of builds into their character. So they do become continuations, although not immediately. They're not born with these traits. They have to rediscover these traits. And so and they go through heirlooms, and the differences between having good karma and bad karma, and what the impact that they have on your characters. And a real change here, I think, between the two editions, is that this seems to be driving the characters towards and the players through their characters, driving them towards living a more heroic and morally just way. So it is really encouraging them to be good people out there in the world. And so that's a 2.7. I didn't get that same sense. 2.7, it seemed more like you're out there, and yes, you're going to live your based on your traditions and your tribal culture and such, but you were kind of neutral in the world. Now it seems that there must be a heroic endeavor, for these characters to really become more powerful, and then to pass that on to the future generations of themselves, in the future, if those traits and everything are discovered by future generations. So, changes in the races in the game. So the dwarves, as I've mentioned, they are now able to come outside into the sunlight. Elves, much more exclusive, much more isolated. They're still immortals, but they're much more less likely to involve in human activities. Gnomes are a new race that are created during the curse time frame, as are halflings. Now, gnomes, they suspect, are coming from a derivation of dwarves. The halflings, the the book leaves it kind of unknown even for the game master, so it's not quite sure. It doesn't make it quite sure to anybody where halflings actually derive from. There's some speculation that they're a cross between humans and elves, or elves and something else. So so you have there. You have humans, and humans are broken down into three different types of classifications of the common man, the high man, and the lesser man. So there's not as many social status levels other than these three. But prior to that, it was much more a stricter caste system almost. You have orcs, which is a new race. Again, believe that they came from. They're somewhat related to Etten kind, and so they're coming from, giants and Ettins and those other mythical creatures at the time. And then orcs are broken down into, common orcs. Goblins are known as lesser orcs. Half orcs are a mix, again, of human and orcish. Hobgoblins are known as greater orcs. And then you have ogres, which, again, ogres are more related to, they're called giant orcs, or they're related to more towards Ettins and giant kind, of that time period. Now it goes to the next section is alignment, and to be perfectly honest with you, although I like some of the alignments in the way that it's described, like there's contemplative, it's harmonic, there's spiritual, there's materialistic, I'm sorry, there's sympathetic, and there's neutral. And if it just kept it there, I would be like, all right, I kind of like this better than, the typical, AD&D, lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, and so on and so on. These, I think, have a different perception of them, but then it goes much more detailed as the combination of attitudes as they relate to alignment, and that's where I kind of get lost. So, we have choices in this game to use parts of it, to discard other parts of it, to add to it. So there is definitely the rule zero for a game master with this game system. And that's probably one thing that I would do. I would like to know if I am going to use alignment, I would stick to those 5 or 6 or 7 variations of contemplative, harmonic, or disharmonic is the opposite, spiritual, materialistic is the opposite of spiritual, sympathetic, unsympathetic, and neutral. So I think that works a little bit better. Alignment and races, they go into, let me get to my next tab. So my next tab here goes back to character creation, and when your character is born actually plays a role in some of your character's attributes. So based on the time of year your character is born in, if you're born in the winter, you'd add intelligence. If you're born in the spring, strength, summer, willpower, autumn is constitution, and on New Year's Day you gain +1 to charisma when you're creating your character. There's also, like if you're born on the same day as a god's main celebration or main holiday, you also get a character trait which is called marked by a deity, and that will give you additional abilities based on that fact. All right. After character generation, we get to taking a look at the character's age, which is actually still part of generation, but talents. And the talents have changed from the last from the last edition. So talents are not as magic centric as they used to be, and they've just added some, removed others, and so there's I think overall there might actually be more talents, but they're more attuned to this setting now. Out of the supplements, there used to be supplements. Now they have character flaws, and there are up to 100, or maybe slightly fewer character flaws that your characters can begin with at the beginning. It starts off, you're going to begin with 1 to 4 flaws, and then you can purchase more flaws in exchange for adding more talents if you wish to. There's character roles. Now the character roles are specifically just for humans because the demi-human races are classes in themselves or roles in themselves. So there are no elven stalkers. There are only human stalkers, but and elves are just elves. So that goes back to old school D&D or ODD for many people. So it's going back to an earlier iteration of that game system. And then they go through telling you the different abilities that come with dwarves. So here we have dwarves and what abilities they have at first level, at 5th level, at 10th level, 15th. Elves, same thing. Gnomes, and so on. So there's racial attributes that they gain as they gain in level, which is kind of unique, actually. I don't recall seeing that elsewhere where they gain racial traits as they gain in power. So that's an interesting thing. Not all of those traits are innate, just from birth. And each role has different traits that they pick up, or different abilities that they gain, whether human or demi-human. Let's see, why did I tab this here? So this here is Bard's a new character role. So you have bards, and then you have the change of sorcery. So sorcerers change from the last edition to this edition. So there's a whole section on bards, a whole section on sorcerers, and how those changes have been, made. And then we get to experience points and, what to do at the end of an adventure or advancing your character. Now, I will go into the next video more on skills and then actual gameplay, and combat and such, such as that, if there are any major changes in the actual game mechanics, but there aren't very many anyway. So I will save that for the next video. Let me switch here. So for the most part, I'm really excited about this. I was, like I said, not expecting this game to come out, and or this edition to come out. It was certainly not on my radar. So now to take a look at this and to start, I already started looking at some of the adventures that I had written previously and seeing how I can transition those to kind of match up with this change of the original setting. And, I think that'll work out pretty well. So once again, thanks for joining in. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments, please leave a comment. If you'd like to, find out more or look into picking up MYFAROG, it's on sale on, not for sale price, but it's being sold on Amazon. I know you could reach it there. You might also be able to reach it from the MYFAROG.org website, so you could order it directly from there as well. I'll leave that in the description. The links in the description. On Facebook, there is a MYFAROG gaming community. pretty, a pretty small community. It's about 200 or like 170 to 200 different members, plus anybody that actually, comes in and visits. It's a tight-knit community, very, very dedicated to talking about this game and doing a lot of events and such. So I highly suggest that you go in there and you join that community if you are going to pick up this game, because there are a lot of really good people there, and always trying to get game sessions up and running on this. One last thing about MYFAROG is that I have found, as a game master and somebody who writes my own adventures, that this system works well with small groups. So if you don't have a large gaming group, if it's just you and one other player, this system works very, very well with doing a solo type campaign, and it works, obviously well with larger groups. I wouldn't say much larger groups. So anywhere from one player to to five makes it ideal game system for any gaming group that within that size. So once again, thanks for joining. I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You all have a good afternoon.